I'm cautiously hopeful. President Richard Fisher served when Worsh was on the board, and they were two large deterrents of quantitative easing. Worsh famously called QE reverse Robin Hood. He and I sat on a panel when he was at Stanford a few years ago, and we share the same views that going as far out on the easing spectrum as QE was not good for the financial markets, was not good for the overall U.S. public. And I'm hoping that he doesn't go in that direction, that he's not tempted to go to zero interest rate policy again, and that we steer clear of QE and continue to shrink the size of the Fed's balance sheet. These are all things that Worsh has indicated that he would advocate for doing, and I hope that he follows through with that.
So after the nomination, there will be the confirmation, and we've had some of the sources telling us that it may not be as smooth. What is your projection for that?
Well, I listened live when Senator Tom Tillis was interviewed earlier this morning on Bloomberg, and he has a very good point. And it's not that he's philosophically misaligned with Kevin Warsh. In fact, I think he thinks he's a great candidate. But he used the word frivolous as it pertained to the lawsuit, that he was waiting until the Department of Justice's frivolous lawsuit was frivolous charges were dropped against Chair Powell before proceeding with any nominee. I think Senator Majority Leader Thune has backed that this will not be possible. You will not be able to progress Warsh through the nomination process until the Department of Justice releases Jerome Powell from these criminal charges.
Danielle, how do you think that Mr. Warsh will move as it relates to interest rate policy? There are a lot of folks have pointed out that he's become maybe even more dovish, less hawkish with time in most recent times, and that may or may not have some political ramifications. How do you think he'll try to proceed with this Fed?
So, of course, that is going to be the perception. I've seen a lot of the comments that he's made, but I would just say this. I think that coming in, that Warsh will be more aligned with Christopher Waller, and that he will recognize that the Fed is failing on its employment mandate and use research and data and alternative data sets to justify continuing to bring the Fed funds rate down. And I think that that's entirely appropriate. But again, I'm hoping that he aligns back with his original thinking that zero interest rate policy is not the way to go, and that he finds a more reasonable Fed funds floor somewhere around, say, 2%.
So if Warsh does become the Fed chair, what changes first for markets? Policy direction, communication, or maybe reaction function?
I think reaction function becomes critical. We have to remember that Worsh was a critical player during the global financial crisis. He has deep understandings of financial markets. We've seen some movement in leveraged loans this week. We've seen a lot of activity in private credit. The good news is we need somebody who has a deep understanding of the banking system, the financial system, their linkages. And I think he'll be able to be a good steward at the Fed, given the extended valuations we've seen and some of the kind of risks and threats of financial instability that are percolating out there.
Danielle, he has a remit, or he's talked about a remit, to narrow the focus of the Fed here. Do you think that's widely shared at the Fed?
Well, I wish it was more widely shared. I've long said that we need to go back to having just the inflation mandate, and that the inflation and labor mandates are inherently in conflict with one another. He's also advocated to continue shrinking the Fed's balance sheet, even if he brings interest rates down. And I hope he goes forward with that as well. But you're right. He would have an uphill battle with a lot of the more dovish members of the board, but he would certainly be more aligned with individuals who are Federal Reserve District presidents who do not advocate for a larger balance sheet.
What do you think Fed Chairman Jay Powell will do when he steps down from his leadership position? Do you think he'll stay on the board, or will he just sail off into the sunset?
I think it was very telling to markets, and it was very telling to the current administration that he refused to answer the question at the press conference. And I would encourage Jerome Powell to stay on through January of 2028. Philosophically, at least, we know that the two are aligned. The two do not like, or at least I should say, Jerome Powell, back when he was first appointed to the Fed, came very close to dissenting against QE3. So I would hope that the two would be able to work together and that Jay Powell would stick around until his term ends.
And if Warsh really is committed to lowering rates very quickly, how much influence does the chair really have in persuading other governors? Because it's not just his one vote, as everyone has repeatedly said.
That is absolutely the case. He could be looking at a number of dissents on day one. However, I think with the messages coming out, with just the clear data that we're seeing, whether it's Conference Board or University of Michigan, or the fact that so many Americans are not filing for unemployment insurance, and yet Google Trends shows you that we've got an almost record level of Americans searching for file unemployment. I think the data will speak for itself, and that many will be on board with lowering rates if we have to wait to do so until June. I certainly hope that is not the case.